Hearing from such a prominent figure, prominent theologian like R.C. Sproul, what's wrong with you people? Seriously. The question that he was responding to was something to this effect. Since God is patient and long-suffering, why was it that his punishment for Adam's sin was so severe? Sproul, he didn't address the question outright, but instead undermined the question by addressing the premise itself. So severe? So severe. You can go and watch the clip and perceive Sproul's disbelief at the presumption that a mere creature, a creature of the dust, would have such a perspective that minimizes our own sin and wickedness and depravity because we have so minimized and thought little of the holiness of God. We have no real sense of just how magnificent and transcendent an other God is. And that is most evident by raising such a question. Why would God's judgment be so severe? We have no grasp of his holiness. We have no real understanding of his grace that he told Adam, on the day that you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will surely die. And what happened that day? Grace. Grace was given. Adam and Eve likewise did not die that very day. And more so, in addition to God's merciful long-suffering and patience at such high-handed rebellion, he clothed them. He took the initiative himself, that a sacrifice was made to clothe his own creatures that were in rebellion. How quick we are to exaggerate our own plight, and how quick we are to minimize God's great holiness. As we come to launch headfirst now into Ecclesiastes, we begin to trudge down in to Hevel, into the vapor that so marks and characterizes this world and all our lives. So, church, brace yourselves. This is not an easy path before us. It is tough slogging here, the pathway that lays before us. There's no glib solution. And as we wade further into Hevel, into the vapor of life, something that resonates deep within us because we feel it. We know what it is that the preacher is speaking about. We feel that God's judgment on humanity, on us, on the creation, that it was severe. But that's because we are too focused on an enlarged view of ourselves and too small a view of who our God is. So Solomon, he takes aim in our passage here this morning in chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes at correcting that. The first foray to help us walk wisely in this world of vapor, that we might find joy in the midst of it. His point here in this chapter is that death will come. Death will come to each and every one of us, despite all of the toil with which we toil. And it will come to us regardless of our vain attempts to figure it out and solve life's riddles by some source of great wisdom. Not even the wisdom of Solomon could bring resolution to such a fate, to such a sentence that we are all under, the sentence of death. One commentator, he captured it well and succinctly, and describing the thrust of this chapter in this way, that accepting death is the first step in learning to live. Accepting death is the first step in learning to live. So church, don't put your hope in what it is that you can do. Don't put your hope in the toil at which you toil. What gain is there in such a weary world? Rather, recognize that you are given for wind and in need of great wisdom. Now, we looked at verses 1 and 2 last week. It's the introductory and framing thesis of the book. Vapor of vapors. All is vapor. All is but a breath. And verse 3 begins to delve into now unpacking that problem that we all feel. And Solomon does so through this rhetorical question. He doesn't provide a direct, straightforward answer, right? That would be too on the nose. It needs to be a rhetorical question because it helps introduce and give us a sense of the hevel we all know and feel. So he asks, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? This rhetorical question is meant to capture our experience that we feel here in a cursed world. All the struggle that it is that we go through, not just our professional or paid toil, that's not strictly what he has in view, but all of the anguish that we experience, all of the things that we set our hand to, and we recognize that we experience it with toil, that it doesn't go as smoothly as we plan, that nothing goes that way. What gain comes from it? That's a question that Solomon is bringing before us. What gain do we get in all of the anguish that we walk through and experience and set our hand to do? His answer is death. That's what we get. We get death. Look at verses 4 and 11. I think these two verses that bracket this kind of poetic introduction here indicated in the ESV by the formatting of the text. The answer to the rhetorical question in verse 3 is then framed by verses 4 and 11, that these two are in parallel. That a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. We're skipping down to verse 11. There is no remembrance of the former nor of the latter for those who come after. Probably can see a footnote there on verse 11 that while the ESV provides things as that which was former or that which is latter, that word is supplied to help interpret what Solomon is getting at. But he writes just plainly the former and the latter. So is it things? Is it generations? Is it words? I think it's best to see it in light of verse 4, that he's speaking of generations of people, that people come and people go. And those who come later will not remember those that had come before. His point is that you will live life and lose it. Every one of us will die, and the world will go on as it always has, and future generations will continue on without you. How many of you could name your great-grandparents? A few of us, right? More than even what I would have guessed. How about their stories, their childhood, their contributions to the world? Do you know the intimate, intricate details of their lives? The great struggles and sorrows that they went through, the great triumphs and victories that they experienced? Maybe you've got a few stories that have been handed down, but for most of us, can't even name them, let alone say something of substance about them. Highlights and illustrates the very principle that Solomon is making here. Now, in the days that have been appointed for us, we feel like our toil is so great. We feel like our triumphs are so magnificent. And he says, you too will die, and you will be forgotten. Just give it some time, and no one will give a thought to who you are or what you went through in life. Just as the generations that have gone before are dead and forgotten, so also you will be one day. Death, it saturates this place. That is a clear and most evident constant in this world. Death is all pervasive. That is Hevel. We are all sons of Adam and daughters of Eve. This brevity of life and the reality of death, it is the reality that Solomon wants us to grapple with and embrace. To not flee from the reality of death or try to set it aside in some far distant place, leave it off in the hospital, ignore the cemeteries, keep it far removed. I can attain youth all the days of my life. And I will, like a child, stick my fingers in my ears and close my eyes, and death isn't coming for me. I will do all that I can to ignore it or distract myself from the reality of it. I think Solomon say that is the path of folly. You need to come to terms with the reality that you too will die. Your days are numbered. We talked about last week this word, Hevel. And I think another facet of the intentionality that Solomon is bringing to this book is a dynamic in the connection of this word, Hevel, with the point that he's making here in the first chapter of the necessity and reality of your own death. It's a key feature of this world that is mired in Hevel. This word, it is the name of the first man to die. We know him as Abel in English, but in Hebrew, his name is Hevel. After Adam and Eve ate from the tree, and God spoke the curse to the woman, or to the serpent, and to the woman, and to the man, and clothed Adam and Eve, and sent them out of the garden east of Eden to experience a world marked by curse and futility. God, he subjected this world to that futility in hope. That it wasn't all curse on that day, but God did speak a word of hope, a word of promise, that he spoke to the woman and said, there will be a son of the woman who will come and he will crush the head of the serpent. So not all was lost on that day, but hope was given, even as the very creation itself was subjected to futility. And as we read in Genesis 4, it seems like Moses, he wants us to read the narrative with the expectation that hope is being delivered upon, that Eve gives birth to a son of the woman. Here he is. And she proclaims, a man that I have gotten by the Lord. That it seems as though here is the serpent crusher who will come, Cain. And God is gracious again and gives yet another son of the woman, Abel. But we see that this world, it is not so readily repaired. Restoration is not so quickly happened upon. As Cain, one who we expect is going to crush the head of the serpent, instead crushes the head of his brother. And we ask, why, O Lord? Why? Well, what's the point of Abel's life, his offering that he provided? Why is this son, this man, so readily taken from this world? Why is his life cut short? Because he is Hevel. This world is Hevel. Life is Hevel. It is but a vapor, a breath, so quick and fleeting. And it is perplexing as we ask the Lord, why? Sin and death and curse, they spread and infect everything. And so it has been from the days of Cain and Abel to Solomon to our day. What is substantively different about the human experience throughout all of these millennia? What has substantively changed? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth, it remains forever. The world, it goes on and on and on, and all things are weary. The creation itself is weary. It groans. And it continues on unchanged, indicated by the three examples that Solomon provides. The sun rises and it sets and it races around to where it comes up again. The wind, it blows north to south and makes its circuit around the globe, just as it has forever. The rivers, they flow unendingly into a sea that never fills. What is different? All has continued on as it always has. And despite all the technological advances that have been developed and experienced, nothing has substantively changed. There is, in essence, nothing new under the sun. At community group this week, Kalina was sharing how she'd come across a story of the advent of the newspaper and how social commentators were saying that this was going to be the downfall of society. No longer are people coming together to listen to the news gathered around a radio, but everyone's going to be isolated to themselves behind their newspaper, and it's just going to be headlines. Sounds awfully similar to what they say about our smartphones, isn't it? Nothing new is under the sun. People are people, and they've always been people. We've always been stuck in the mire of our own ways, our own selfishness. There is nothing new under the sun, and just as Abel went, so also one day will you and I. Death is coming. This is the grim reality of gaining a heart of wisdom in this weary world. That we need to start here, because if we don't, we won't learn how to walk wisely in this world. Perhaps the reality of death is the thing that has settled upon you especially heavily over these last couple weeks since Charlie Kirk's murder. Maybe that's the thing that has been on replay in your mind. Not so much about him as an individual or the ministry and mission that he gave himself to, but just the fact that his biographical details are so very similar to many of us here. 31-year-old, married, 2 young children, and his life is snuffed out. And that's landed on you. My goodness, that could have been me. I'm 31. I've got 2 kids. What is my life? Perhaps the weight of having your own mortality brought before your face has been the thing that has been a low-grade constant here over these couple of weeks. And that's the very sense that Solomon is trying to impart to us. Charlie Kirk's hevel of a life, the breathiness of it, the vaporousness of it, here one day and gone the next, leads us to ask, when will your time come? Solomon, he'll say later on in the book that man knows not his time. It's not unique to any one individual. It wasn't unique to the preacher. It wasn't unique to Charlie Kirk. It's true for each and every one of us. You don't know what today will bring. Perhaps this day will be your last. And the very reality of your mortality is meant to chasten you. It's meant and intended by God, revealed in His Word, to have an effect on how it is that you conduct yourself here in this world marked by hevel. You are not guaranteed to live into your 80s or 90s. Perhaps the Lord has appointed only 31 years for you as well. But even if you are given closer to a century, what of it? You too will be forgotten another century from now. Friend, the starting place of wisdom is grappling with the reality of your own death. That is the case because it is the clearest witness to your ego that you are not God. You will die. And every time that we hear testimony or read in the news of someone whose life has been snuffed out, that we perceive, especially that it was too soon, that we should recognize that today is but another day sustained and given by God's grace. That I am not God. I will not last in this world forever. You will one day stand before your Maker. Is there a proper fear of Him that is brought into sharper focus by your own mortality? In your Maker, He has given you for wind. He's given you for wind. Look at verses 12 through 14. Solomon, he says how it was that he set himself to understand all that goes on in this weary world, trying to grapple with it and make sense of it. And his conclusion in verse 13 is this: it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He's saying it is a grievous task that the sons of Adam have been given. It is all vanity and a striving after wind, verse 14. So here Solomon, he introduces another key term used in this book, striving after the wind. He repeats this phrase throughout the book, and it's regularly used in parallel to our other key term, to hevel, to that vapor or vanity. I think just as I've not been persuaded that word hevel should be understood as purposelessness or meaninglessness, I think likewise that this other phrase of striving after the wind, that's not what he's getting at. That's not the imagery that he's driving toward. That he's not saying by this imagery of striving after wind that life is pointless, that it's as pointless as trying to catch the wind. Rather, I think what he means is that it is frustrating and difficult to grasp. That's what life is like. That a idiom that we're more familiar with is what Solomon is getting at, that life is like herding cats. You try to do it, right? You're trying to shepherd the wind. You're herding cats, and it just doesn't work the way you think it should. You're trying, but oh, how frustrating it is. You're trying to get your arms around it, and it just doesn't happen. This alternate translation of shepherding the wind, it's on the observation that the root word that Solomon here uses gets translated for us as striving or chasing, that the same root word it's the same as the root for shepherd. And that when we get to the end of the book, a facet of Solomon's conclusion is that the wisdom of this book is given by the one shepherd. That there is one shepherd who has imparted wisdom through what it is that he has written for us, God himself, and that life is like shepherding the wind that has been given to us by the one shepherd, the all-wise shepherd. And Solomon sees the starting place of wisdom is embracing this reality of death in this weary world under God's providence. That we have a perspective. Solomon has a perspective that all the weariness of the toil of this world, all the shepherding of the wind, it is given by God. It is under his providential plan. That it is an unhappy business. But verse 13, it is one that has been given by God. And so Solomon understands the very dynamic in nature of this weary and windy world, that it is governed by God. Solomon, he knows well the triune God of the Bible. He knows who he is, having been revealed through both his world and in his word. Solomon knows the books of Moses. He knows God who appeared to him twice. Solomon, he knows God's providence over the grievous task that he himself must endure. That he's been told by God that the kingdom will be taken from him and given to his servant. And he's saying that God ordains it all. It is all given by God. That God has subjected the creation with all its death and toil to futility. And friend, you also are given for wind. This is your lot in this life. God has not ordained for you to go through life with all manner of leisure and comfort and ease. That is a false gospel that has been sold to you. You're not guaranteed those things. We get glimmers of it, we get tastes of it, but that's not the flavor of life on the whole. Rather, life is marked by hevel, by a shepherding of the wind, because the realities of the curse, because like Adam, you and I are but creatures of the dust, and we have rebelled against the Maker in our own sin and depravity. We have shaken our fist at the Creator, and we too are deserving of judgment because of our own disobedience and presumptions. We have mocked him, and life, because of this, will be like herding cats. It will be like shepherding the wind till the day you die. What are we to do then with this unhappy business? How is it then that we move forward in a cursed world that God has ordained? How do we attain meaning and purpose and significance in that which we cannot control? That which we can't get our arms around, we just can't grasp? Or as Solomon poetically puts it in verse 15, what is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. He'll go on to ask similarly in chapter 7, who can make straight what God has made crooked? This is the world that God has ordained. What can you do about it? You can't count what you don't have. It's like trying to solve the equation 3x equals y. You can't do it. You don't have enough data. You don't have enough inputs. Right? But nevertheless, we try. And so did Solomon. What would be your first impulse? A world marked by vapor and the perplexities that accompany it. If you were one who had been given by God an understanding mind in order to govern God's people and to discern between good and evil, you'd play to your strengths, wouldn't you? Right? This is what God had done for Solomon in 1 Kings 3:9. He genuinely was wiser and had greater understanding than all who had preceded him in Jerusalem. He's not boasting in verse 16. That's just the reality of the fact of God's anointing on him, that God had done this very good thing. And so he plays to his strengths. Surely, you can imagine Solomon thinking, this vexing problem of death and futility in this world, it can certainly be alleviated by great wisdom. Of all of the understanding that I have, surely I can crack this nut. Surely I can bring resolution here. And so he set himself to know it. He said in his heart, surely I can accomplish this. By my heart, I've gained great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So he devoted himself to the deployment of that very gift, of using his wisdom to try to understand this. Thinking, if I just could solve this riddle, figure out the syllogism, work out the logic and reason, then my toil, it would be great gain. If I just sort out how to navigate the path of life with wisdom and evade all foolish behavior and thinking, then I will have arrived. God and his world, they're just like a Rubik's Cube that needs to get solved, an Enigma code that just has to get cracked. Friend, this is the vain striving of humanism. It is an exaggerated confidence in human potential. Now, you may not frame it in that kind of a way of pursuing great wisdom like the preacher, but do you stand aloof from God's word because you think you know better? You lob canned critiques about accuracy or application? Or do you get satisfaction through philosophical ideas that you can grapple with just in that realm of ideas so that you keep yourself at arm's length from the summons of the gospel to repent and believe? Listen to history's wisest king who did the same. Verse 17, 18. I perceive that this also is but a shepherding of the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. As refined as your debate arguments may be, as tight as your logical deductions are, they will only lead to more and more unanswerable questions. Is there a place for wisdom? Absolutely. That's why Solomon also wrote the book of Proverbs. There's much that we can learn and walk in this world. But wisdom itself cannot deliver us out from under the sun. Can the toiling at wisdom be the means of gain in this weary and windy world? Only if it is the wisdom of God, Christ and him crucified. Accepting death is the first step in learning to live. You must accept your own death. This weary world will one day claim you back to the dust from which you came. And clamoring about your whole life, trying to shepherd the wind, it will prove fruitless. The humility of accepting that you are a creature of the dirt that has defied the holy and everlasting God is accepting the death that you most rightly deserve. And then by faith, whether for the first time or the millionth time, you accept the death of Christ. This is the wisdom of God. It is by his death that is the only way to live. Christ's death on the cross is the only way to life. God, he is slow to anger. He is patient toward you, you who are in Christ. And gaining wisdom in this weary, windy world, it does not happen, and it cannot happen by your own toil, your own seeking and searching, your own application of your heart to know wisdom. Oh, that you would accept death, your own death, and accept your own futility to deliver yourself from under the sun. And gain the wisdom of God, Christ and him crucified, that you might be delivered through this weary, windy world.